Welcome to Leadership Bites with myself, your host, Guy Bloom. This is a leadership podcast where I have conversations with colleagues, I chat with guests, and sometimes there'll be just me talking. You can connect with me at livingbrave.com, and when you enjoy the episode, subscribe and please tell everyone. So, listen, let's rock and roll and get into character. So, Lou, it's fantastic to have you on this episode of Leadership Bites. I always start these by saying, look, obviously I know who you are because I've invited you on, and we've worked together. So,
Wow.
which is, we were just talking, that's like a flashback to the past. But Lou, just who are you? Who you're working for? What's the role? And then we'll get stuck into it.
Super. Hi, Guy. Great to be here. It's a new thing talking on podcasts for me, and something that I've kind of got my confidence up a little bit more to talk about the agenda and what I'm all about. So I'm Lou Houston. I'm head of inclusion at Tarmac. Tarmac are the UK's largest construction company. We have around 6,000 employees in the UK, and we're part of a really big group called CRH, who are global, and we have about 80,000 employees worldwide.
Now, the reason I reached out was 2.1. It was just great as you came across the old LinkedIn stream and, various things, and me going, oh, of course, Lou, I'm an egg. But, depending on what the role is, it would have been worthy of a chat, but maybe not worthy of the podcast. But, so lovely to connect. But, I'm head of sausage making, which would be awesome, but not relevant to me, when I'm doing leadership. But, that head of inclusion, it's and I need to be very careful when I say this, but I was going to say, I almost said the word, it's a trendy thing now, and I pulled myself back because that would have been a really wrong thing to have said, but it's relevant. Let's say it's become more relevant. I think maybe it was a thing that maybe people, head of inclusion, what does that mean? But I think maybe I'm going to be the Philistine on behalf of Philistines and say, you're at a social gathering and somebody says, oh, inclusion, what's that about? What's that response that you give people to bring them up to speed?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I'm great at dinner party, really good. And my husband loves it because I get on a soapbox quite a lot. But I think from a corporate perspective, what I'm pretty delighted about is that Tarmac have been taking this journey seriously for a good few years. Actually, I've been in post for 2 years. And unlike some organisations that have reacted and still positive to the kind of Black Lives Matter movement or the Me Too movement and thought we really need to be on this, we were on it before, so good for us. How did the role come about? I've worked in HR for a number of years. As you know, you and I have worked together from HR operations, but more recently as head of talent for Tarmac. So this is the first thing I say to a lot of our leaders. Forget the PC stuff. Talk about talent. Talk about who you want to bring into your business and who you want to keep within your business. Because if you try and think of it that way, so we want the best talent within our businesses. We all want that. And we want everybody who works within our businesses to bring all they've got to the party, because we want the best ideas. We want that good mix of conflict, challenge, ideas, all of those things. And you will only get that when people feel like they belong and they feel like they can do that within an environment. So they're safe, they feel safe enough, I guess. So as a business, as a construction company within a big old industry, which we are, think about next gen, people that want to come and work for organisations. When they look at your careers website, they're looking at, how sustainable are you? What's your carbon footprint? Do I really want to associate myself with you? And I think if we're honest about it, construction is a long way back from kind of, wanting to work for Google or Amazon or all these kind of really hip companies. So I think as an industry, we recognised a number of years ago, unless we did something, we were going to seriously be in trouble in a number of years. Got an ageing demographic workforce, and not lots of innovation. There is lots of innovation when you get into it. But from the outside in, you wouldn't see that. You'd see somebody tarmacking a road or quarrying in a quarry. So I guess that's my number one. I've got lots more to talk about on that, but I guess that's a dinner party. I guess that's what I would say. It's all about bringing people in and making people feel like they belong. And who doesn't want that, right?
So what I'm hearing there is, there's people in roles already in an organisation, that maybe, and I don't want to use the word, I always offer the first word I was going to say, because I recognize that sometimes it's completely the wrong word, but it also tells me that I may have old thoughts in my head, right? So I was going to say,
Talk about bias. Yeah,
yeah,
go,
exactly.
yeah.
But I don't want to hide from that. So I offer it out and
No,
go,
do it.
I'm about to say a word. I'll tell you what it is, then I'll choose the right word. But,
Okay.
so some people are almost institutionalized by the environment that they're in. I've been here a long time and I see the world through that particular lens. I'm not a bad person doing bad things, but I kind of imprinted on that when I started, chicken and egg. And now you're asking me to look through a different lens. So there's that, if you pick up the stick, you get both ends. And then, so I've been here a long time, and you've then got those people in the middle of that distribution curve, I guess, who are, well, I do have a particular sort of frame of reference, but if the majority of people are looking through that lens around me, the safer thing to do might be, to share that perspective, so I'll go that way. And then you've got people on the outside looking in, who, what I'm hearing from you there is that, so it is about inclusion when I'm in, but will I feel included if I come? Is that almost that full spectrum that we're talking about there?
Well, you can't have diversity without inclusion.
Right.
So you can do all you want around updating your website, putting out the good corporate messages, but when people come in, if they don't feel it straight away, they'll leave. So that's not a great situation to be in. I think we can all agree on that. I think what you're talking about is the uncomfortable conversation, and believe you me, I've had a number of them, and that vulnerability piece, right. and that's and actually the third thing, and I think it's a really important point to make, and I make it a lot with our senior teams, is that we're really successful at what we do. Go us, we've got this. We're the UK leading, we're part of CRH, we're massively successful, and actually we've done that with very little diversity if you take it on face value. And of course that's stuff like, how do we look? But I'm talking about the stuff behind that, like what we can't see, the beliefs, the kind of the way we deal with things, our learning styles, which of course you would know an awful lot about. So I have a mixed bunch. I have a bunch of people who have been on their own self journey and get it. They get that actually this is the way the world is changing, and we need to change, and we need to reflect the people that we serve, otherwise we'll be left behind. And there's lots of examples in business of companies that have done that and were really massive and fell really fast because they did not keep up. And then there's the ones that are kind of, you start talking to about belonging, and they all of a sudden start thinking, well, this does mean something to me. Just because I'm white, middle-aged, senior manager, I still want to feel like I belong. And something that has happened with us is that we're this kind of sandwich generation where we're looking after children, but we're also looking after our parents. And a number of managers within our business have had to work more flexibly than they did 10 years ago because they've got different responsibilities. So all of a sudden this agenda means something to them too. And I think that's an important thing to say, that a lot of people initially think about inclusion, think about the tick box, race, the kind of gender, the kind of stuff you can see. But when you delve beneath that, we all want to feel like we belong. We all want to feel like relaxed. We feel like we're at home. And that's really, really important. So I have a spectrum of people, but again, when I walk into a room and I say, I know you've got 4 hours of me, look at you. And often I can think people, not always, but there's a part, and I know people do it, and that's okay. I think really use these 4 hours doing something else. Usually, and I would say 90% of the time, they walk out of the room going, I really enjoyed that conversation. That was such a different conversation to stuff I do day in, day out, and I'm going to do something different, both personally and with my team. And that's really motivational for me because every conversation counts.
And I'm very interested in, when you've got younger organizations, in the sense of, I work with some private equity based organizations. They're startups, and they are generally London based. They're of a younger age, and I wouldn't say there's an automatic diversity. That wouldn't be relevant to say, but they are inherently more diverse because they're almost at that starting block, and geographically it's more of a mixed demographic anyway, and blah, 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 blah. But then, of course, when you have organizations, as you point out, that have been around, well, in most of us for living memory,
Yeah.
You know, I've always known that name, Tarmac, for example,
Yeah.
and you've got long tenure, then it's not an organization's there's no reason, you know, we're not going to start getting rid of people who are perfectly great.
No, no, but
right,
absolutely clear.
No, we're going to have a forced mix here.
Yeah.
But actually, the tenure, of course, then may mean that actually the turnover here is of a level that even if we forced certain hiring protocols, it would still take, you know, potentially a decade to come through.
Yeah, more. I've done it.
Yeah.
I've modelled it out. Yeah,
Oh, right.
we modelled it out. We've got really long servers, so we've either got people that are going to leave quite quickly, and as we know, like the new generation do that anyway. That's people move around more so than they did traditionally. But yeah, we've also got really, really long service and brilliant. You know, especially in a heavy industry like ours. You know, that experience counts. You know, when you're dealing with kind of geology and those sorts of things, it's all learned experience. And so yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think it really, there's 2 points here. Number one is you need to know your data. So okay, let's know where we're at, what we're at, and where are we trying to get to. And there's a number of things we did there to understand the current makeup of the workforce and what they really wanted out of this agenda. So that's number one. And number two, we've set some ambitions. So we haven't set targets. We've decided to call them ambitions, and we are tracking those ambitions. So I think it takes away straight away that vulnerability of perhaps a demographic that are in the majority that think I've got no chance here anymore. I don't fit what they want for the future. That's absolutely not the case, and that, you know, it's a lot of reassuring the workforce that this is about us all. It's just about being welcoming to all and safeguarding this business into the future. Everyone's here, and we're good at what we do. So it's a really valid point, Guy.
I've noted a couple of things down just from hearing you talk there. And one thing that strikes me is it's almost an interesting balance of don't beat yourself up as an organization because you can't force certain things to shift in terms of hires, etc. But also don't let yourself off the hook either. And that's an interesting balance, I guess, of, you know, what is, well, you know, what can we do other than maybe go on the training course versus hold on, Houston, we may have a problem here.
Hey.
Yeah. But boom, you see what I've been waiting, I've been saving that one. I didn't know.
I know.
I didn't know if I was going to be able to get it in.
At one point, I was self-employed and doing like HR consultancy stuff, and I nearly called myself Houston HR or HR, we have a problem. I stepped away because I just thought, even though I think people would remember you. So I'm sorry, before you said that. So there's a number of interventions. I mean, one thing, and again, really interested. A lot of people say, what can I do? And I was like, not one thing. Tell me if you find out the one thing, because I'd be really interested to know. It's a lot of little things that will add up to one big thing and gain momentum. And I think I said at the beginning of this, I've only recently started talking externally quite a lot about this journey, because I feel like at Tarmac we're at a point where we've got the foundation in place, not all the brilliant basics, but we've really worked hard on it. And I feel like now it's more genuine. I can be more genuine about talking about this journey, because I feel like we're on the journey. Whereas at the beginning, when people were asking me to talk about it, I felt like the member of Tarmac listened to me talk, they would say, well, really? Because I don't feel any of that. And don't get me wrong, there will be people in our business who still feel that way, because I'm a realist, and we have a connected employees and we have unconnected employees, so employees that are on quarries or on the roads and stuff. And it's a real challenge for me, and COVID has brought even more challenges around not actually touching everybody. But I feel that as a business, we've committed to it. So I feel more like I can talk about it honestly, and feel okay about that. And celebrate what we are, because there are a number of things as well.
So there are.
Oh, I'm still here. Are you?
A little bit of feedback. There are tangibles, then there are jigsaw pieces which you can now identify. And whereas what I'm hearing there is at the start, it may have been an aspiration, it may have been, you know, I've got the roadmap, but we haven't visited any of these places yet. And I wonder, just for you, what are the What are the jigsaw pieces? What are the symbols that say to you, because you can talk about it till you're blue in the face, you can beat the drums and all of that kind of stuff, and you can be even given, inverted commas, permission to do it, because then you become part of the tick box exercise. Oh, we've got somebody that does that. And, exactly, here I am. But for you to go, I'm this isn't just a charade, this is a real thing. How do you know it's real?
Okay, so I think it's really important up front to say that when the role merged from head of talent to head of inclusion, I was completely overwhelmed. Completely, because I feel it and I want it, and I really plays to all the things that I believe in. So it was a massive opportunity to make a difference. So amazing. Don't come along that often in your career. So number one, so I booked myself onto loads of seminars and listened. Remember those days we could go into a room, and what I really struggled with this agenda was I used to listen to big businesses talk about this, but they would never really talk about the detail. What did you actually do? What did you actually do? Because I can't, all I can hear is these big business words around, culture and freeze and all this stuff. So I actually reached out to a number of leaders and had conversations like this, and I'm really grateful to a number of people that took their time out to talk to me about it. So I think, first of all, the most important thing, well, actually, there's a number of important things, but knowing where you are, so knowing your data is really important, because if you don't know where you are, you don't know what you're dealing with, and you don't know how to measure it, and measuring any change program is really critical. I think listening to your employees is over and above, everything, because it informs your agenda. But there's listening and there's hearing. And I think the reaching out to our employees via our employee survey, which was anonymous, find out a bit about their demographic, the tick box, but also asking them, what do you want to see? And then as a senior management team, sitting down and looking at that and saying, okay, so this is where we are. This is what our employees want to see. And what do we do in between to get us to there? And there's a number of key things that we did. I've talked about training. I kind of say, be ready to invest. So from a senior management perspective, there's a number of ways there. Invest pound signs. So we've invested in some of our policies. So for example, our maternity policy used to only pay, I think it was 12 weeks full pay. We now do 6 months full pay, because we recognise that actually our gender split wasn't where we wanted it to be. We want to attract and retain more women, and that's a key policy, along with flexible working. So that's got a cost implication. The other cost implication was stuff like our facilities out on site. The facilities in our industry are built for men. And actually it makes a real assumption that men don't want a safe space to use the bathroom, use the shower, do some prayer or meditation. It makes an assumption that this is a different demographic, but actually a lot of people want that, and the survey told us that. So invest in stuff like that. Training I've talked about is a massive part of it. And then something that's been really fabulous for me is kind of personal stories. So one of our company values is proud, and when I was talking to our employees about tell me what inclusive feels like. And a lot of people say, well, I feel like I want to be proud to work at Tarmac. I want to be able to say to people, and I'm proud of who I am. So we came up with this campaign. Well, actually, somebody who works for me, Amrit, she is a whiz at these things. And she came up with Proud to Be Me. And what did that do for us? It spotlighted real people and their real backstories, and it's so powerful. So we now use this Proud to Be Me as a way of introducing ourselves at all our meetings. So before I would come on, I would say, I'm Lou Houston, and I'm proud to be me for these 3 reasons. It could be anything. It could be I'm proud to be gay, I'm proud to get a degree, I'm proud to work at Tarmac. It doesn't matter. We don't prescribe it. But what I would say is I found out things about colleagues that I've worked with for over 10 years. I didn't know. It kind of opens the conversation. And then we've set up employee, we call them communities, but you may know them as networks or employee resource groups. And they're dedicated groups that provide a voice from our employee groups into senior managers, because a member of our executive committee sponsors each of those. So I'm already seeing that traction. So around the XCOM tables, not just me and the HR director talking about this, but our kind of MDs of our regional businesses, our strategy director, talking about LGBT or BAME communities. And that is so powerful, because getting other people to talk about a community they don't necessarily identify with is where you want to be. This is where we start to see stuff happen and stuff moving. That was a lot, right?
Yeah, and I find this really intriguing. There's these symbols. I often talk when I'm working with teams about symbolic acts, symbolic gestures, the things that tell the rest of the organization that this is a genuine thing and it's here to stay. So whatever those things might be. And when I hear about something like I'm proud to be me, that's you could bring it in as an intervention. But of course, if leaders of the business start to actually stand up and go, hi, everybody. So listen, I'm proud to be me because, and then they offer an element of vulnerability in that, recognizing that it doesn't make them vulnerable. Yeah. Therefore, giving people a permission and even an expectation, then it's the intervention is the thing, and that's great. But of course, it has to be role modeled, it has to be seen. So I'm hearing that yes, you've done it, but what I'm hearing there is that that's been picked up, and you're seeing people at a weighty level.
So we did a just before COVID, actually, in February. I know it was February because it was the day before Valentine's Day, and we had a big debate about could we keep everyone away on Valentine's Day. We agreed we could in the end. But our senior manager, so the senior vice president, and all of his direct reports and anybody that went on stage that day, so my guess is it was around 200 senior leaders, introduced themselves via Proud for Me. And we heard about disability, we heard about family, we heard about social mobility. Somebody got up and talked about being premenopausal, wow, in a room full of guys. And then said, wow, I can't believe I just said that in a room full of guys. But you're absolutely right. It brings vulnerability, and it also it just makes people human, and we are all human. And although we share, I'm sure people have got a work persona and a personal persona, and that's also absolutely fine. But what worked a real trick with that is that it's not prescribed at all. You say whatever you want to say. If you really don't want to share something, you don't have to. And then as management teams, a lot of teams have taken it and done it within their teams as well. But again, it's like, if you don't want to take part, you don't have to. So it gives the backstory. But a few people have really brave enough to come forward and talk about being a member of LGBT, and we've highlighted them in magazines and stuff, and it just starts the conversation.
And I'm male, and male mental health is a thing, I think, as well. And that's I think it's twice the rate of suicides for males than it is for females. And that's an interesting one, I suppose, particularly in probably a fundamentally, I'm working a lot in the construction industry, and it is predominantly male, especially at the pointy end, so to speak. And so those things about bringing, there are, what would I say here? I guess there are the flagship kind of things that you can say, hey, that's inclusion. And it's interesting, I suppose, that if somebody can say, yeah, I love poodles, or something, and not Rottweilers. I've been
wanting to say it for 20 years.
not Rottweilers, which would be the manly thing to say, but no, and Chihuahuas, and not to be. I mean, and that's that interesting thing, isn't it? And I've never really been confident enough to say that, because maybe that would. So, am I excluded? Well, actually, I don't think that's any less powerful than anything else.
Yeah, like I said, it's about getting to know the human behind the job title and starting the conversation and realising that other people have got stuff going on. So a good example, and I think, would this have happened anyway? The Zoom thing that everyone's going on, and there was somebody who was a senior manager, and he was having some real mental health issues with his daughter during lockdown, and one of our senior managers was calling him about, I don't know, end of month stats or whatever that might be, and The more senior manager said I could just tell there was something. So rang him back up afterwards and said, definitely something going on here, isn't there? Or is everything okay? Ask the question. And then, of course, it all came out, and we managed to support. And that employee came forward, and we did a bit of a one of these kind of conversations that people dialed into and listened to. And that was really powerful, because you're absolutely right. We link up with an organisation called Mates in Mind, who obviously mental health, especially for men, because we are predominantly male. But just listening to a senior manager talk about mental health, because that was part of his story, what was going on in his life. Again, small thing that kind of is massive replicate, out in the workforce, for people to hear that. And we have unfortunately had suicides, and whereas before it'd be,
yes,
we were all devastated. We've had people talk live on these things about how that felt to be the line manager, or how that felt to be the crew member of. And that's really interesting. And I'm not going to take credit for all of that, but I do believe that the IND agenda is helping us have that conversation.
Yeah, and I think I've been fascinated by that as I've done coaching and more in this space as well, in terms of in the COVID times, just that's become quite relevant. And I was just having a session with somebody not so long ago, and he'd had a conversation with me, and that, this is a very strong individual, physically strong, and a large man, and all the symbols of strength were there, but actually there was an inherent pain that he was sitting with. And when we started to have the conversation, what became clear was his daughter had basically turned around and said, why is work more important to you than me? Right. And
Collective.
Yeah, exactly. And it's fascinating stuff. And I wonder, and I just wanted to check in with you, because I'm willing to kind of hold my own kind of lack of understanding on these things sometimes. The ability from somebody to share that, you could say, well, that's, there's a mental health umbrella there, there's the what it was doing to him, et cetera, et cetera. But does that sit under inclusion? Is that the ability for me to, just the fact that I as a male can share my sense of fear, that's not as obvious as I have a disability or I'm in a blah, blah, blah. But does it still sit in that camp?
It's really interesting, Guy, because I say a lot that kind of, I feel like I'm the conscience of the business sometimes, right. But I can't be. I can't be in every conversation and, sure. and be at every place for everyone at every time. And I often get called and asked, "What do you think, Lou?" And that's great, but I'll often say, "Well, what do you think?" Because we're all human. We all kind of get this. I think what the inclusion or these sort of conversations start is that openness of the, that we aren't just a job title, that we've all got stuff going on. And I think that vulnerability piece, and it's obviously a real huge part of great leadership and management, is knowing you're vulnerable and taking that plunge, isn't it? But yeah, I think you can't. Change happens and inclusive culture happen when everyone plays their part in that. I just like to think that I sometimes start the conversation and kind of like the match, and then people have to go on their own journey. So the training course I talk about, when I finish doing the session, we send TED Talks and we say, like, have a look at this. I say to them, try and pick up a different publication, try and listen to a different podcast, try and in your community, or when you're at the next work conference, go and talk to somebody you don't know. Just so many small things that can mean that actually you start getting a bit broader around your thinking and your opinions on stuff. So I can't believe you do that. Some people leave the room and just still pick up the same publication and do what they're doing.
Sure. So maybe inclusion is anything. I can talk about anything if it makes me feel included.
Yeah, belonging. The concept of belonging is I think one that people can resonate with. Everyone can think of a situation where you've walked into a room, whether that be at school, in a workplace, at university, at a conference, whatever, and felt, oh, I don't belong here. Everybody's got that. And if someone tells me they've never been in that situation, lucky them, because everybody has. So I kind of always said to them, think about that situation. Think about if you were living that day in, day out, coming into your workplace, how that would feel. And most people would be devastated to think that anybody in their team or their business would feel that way. So I love the concept of belonging, because I think we can all resonate with it, or it means something to all of us.
Yeah, I think that resonates very strongly. And I wonder what I mean, I can guess, but this is your space. What are the barriers to this? What are the things that stop people? Well, I don't know if it's intellectually understanding it, because I don't think it's per se complex, but it's what I call willful disassociation, which is I intellectually understand what you're saying, but I'm just not going to go there.
Yeah, there's a real, mixture of people. I think barriers are there, and there are also perceived barriers that aren't there, but it's the person that's kind of looking at it, seeing it. So I think that's where, we talked about employee communities and listening to those underrepresented groups. That's really important. It's also important to, and that's where my role does come in a lot, actually, just have the time and the space to stand back and really think about barriers. So something really simple that we did around attracting people to come into our workforce was review our job descriptions. So I know it sounds like really simple, but what happens a lot in a busy workplace, we're all like fast thinking, not slow thinking. So we're like, that person's left, quickly, let's dust the job description off that we used 10 years ago, whack it out onto, LinkedIn, we'll attract somebody or whatever. Actually taking a step back and going, okay, how does that read? What does that look like? So we took off stuff like needs experience of, asphalt. We don't need experience of that. We've got a safety park that can train you that. But we do really need good customer service, and we do really need people that are willing to learn and willing to be trained. So come and join us. And
yes, interesting.
And also, I say to our site managers, if we keep advertising Inquiry Weekly, guess who we're going to get? Who's reading Inquiry Weekly? But we set up a new resourcing hub, which is also one of the massive things that we did on this. And we obviously use LinkedIn, but we also use stuff like Mumsnet and linking with partnerships with organisations that represent people that are perhaps ex-offenders or jobless, or with the local religious groups. And what we found is, by widening the net and changing job descriptions, we're removing the barriers without even thinking about the barriers, because it's fast thinking versus slow thinking. Stop and think about it. We didn't need to replace square peg, square hole, or would something a little bit different work a bit better for us? So I think a lot of that is to step back. I get that that's really hard.
It is interesting, though. Things when we talk about this, a degree would be having had to have gone to university.
Oh, we stopped all that.
Yeah,
we stopped loads of that. We stopped loads of it.
I had an experience a little while ago that when I was working before I went self-employed, somebody took over the role of leadership development before I took over the role of leadership development. And after a couple of months, I asked us to have a little bit of their time. And I said, does that amount of interest, would you have given me the job if I'd have applied now? And the answer came back, no. And I went, which I knew was rhetorical because I knew where I was going with it. And I said, and can I check in why, or shall I tell you why I think why? And they said, well, tell me why you think why. I said, because I haven't got a degree. And they went, yes, I wouldn't give anybody a degree in leadership if they, a leadership role if they didn't have a master's in leadership development or something along those lines. And I said, so regardless of the fact that in terms of customer reaction or net promoter or anything like that, I significantly usually get the highest ratings amongst the board. That's still a factor for you.
I know.
Yeah, it is. And they couldn't let it go.
I know. And it's you're right. It's the stepping back and looking at.
Actually, just say that. So I felt excluded. I resigned.
Yeah,
actually.
There's a barrier, right?
And then when they left, I came back and got the job. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
But it's just I felt so excluded. I was like, oh.
But also, my challenge to you is that's probably your thing as well. And I'm sure it's not. I hope it's not anymore with how successful you are. But I think sometimes you think, I haven't got a degree. I'm not going to get that, so I'm not going to go for it. And something I talked about right at the beginning of this was this talent pipeline a lot. And what I see now and what makes me feel happier is when I look down, to the 3 to 5 year plus side, I'm starting to see some diversity there. That's again because the training that we've given to line managers when they're doing the talent reviews is around step back and really look at this. Like, what do we really want? What is talent? What is your perception of talent? What is your unconscious bias? Why are you picking that person to do the development opportunity? Why not that person? And, it's turning it all on its head, which is really uncomfortable. And I think, you're ready to be uncomfortable if you're really ready to go on this journey, because it is hard. And I think when I took that talent role, and I kind of said, why are the same names? What are the same names? And if they've been on the talent radar for 2 or 3 years, why don't they know our next leadership team? Why? It's the why. Why are we doing it this way? And I'm sure I'm a headache. I'm sure I am. And I sometimes even apologize before I say it. And I'll say sometimes, what I'm going to say. And I think there's a collective, we know what you're going to say. I feel like I'm winning a bit when people start doing it before I say it. They know what I'm going to say.
And I think that's okay. I think, if you're not paying me to be a saboteur, but you are paying me to hold space on an opinion or on a way of thinking that you yourself have tasked me with doing. So I'm going to use that license. And I often say, I always say to pitch, when I'm pitching for business, I go, listen, be careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
Because I think, Lou, you're very similar to me in the sense of, because I will give it to you. And if your people feel the change, and then the problem with the change is that you won't change, then you'll end up doing more damage than when you started in the first place.
Yeah, and I think I absolutely agree with you. And I think a lot, we've started this journey, so we've put ourselves out there. We're saying we want to include you. We want, this is our ambition, this is our vision. Everything I do underpins that we do as a business. But be careful what you ask for, and what you see a lot in a inclusive culture is people coming forward raising perhaps a harassment or bullying issue because they feel that they feel like the environment's ready to accept it. And actually it's quite a positive indicator. Of course it will level it off, but I think if you're telling your employees this is what as a business we are about, you've got to be ready then for people to say, well, that's not what I feel, so what are you going to do about it? And that's where I say be ready to invest, because it's not just pound signs, it's actually you've got to invest time, and you've got to invest hearts and minds into this, because this isn't something you can just tick box. If you're going to do it properly, you can't tick box, and it's people can see straight through it. People can see straight through when it's a tick box. And I'm really passionate about that, and I really hope that that I'm coming across as that, because I am a realist. I know it's going to take time, and I know there'll be good pockets of behaviour and bad everywhere. But progress against any agenda is good. And the other thing I would say is, don't wait for it to be perfect to do it, because I got myself in a bit of a tizzle at the beginning of this. I didn't want to upset anybody, and I want to bring everyone along with me, and it needs to be perfect because I don't want to upset that group, and I don't want to upset them. And actually, I've kind of had to really take a step back and say to myself, I'm doing this genuinely. We're doing this as a business with all the best intentions. And if for some reason somebody gets offended along the way, talk to me about it, and I'll look at that, because I'm open to it. But not doing anything is actually louder, because not doing anything is awful. And I hope the people that work with me can see that and feel that from me.
And I guess that what also happens is that part of that person's reaction to you is part of their change often. And if you have enough evidence that says, actually, no, of course I can always learn to say something differently or better. That's the stuff of life. But actually my message, do you trust my intent? Do you understand that I'm coming from a good place? Fine. So actually I can take the feedback that maybe that word wasn't the right word or something like that if I'm off cue there. But the reality is, how much of that probably sits with them. And I'm quite interested, no, I'm not, I'm incredibly interested in something that plays into the caricature of this, but also is sometimes true, which is when people weaponize it. And I don't know if that, what do I mean by that, is when, if somebody wants to almost start to utilize the agenda of inclusion to push an agenda that they have. And when I look to the States, for example, that there is a lot of stuff going on over there, which has literally weaponized these topics to the point where they're pushing for things to a level that seem to go beyond the reasonable?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer on a global scale on that, but I think I think it's whatever something that you're comfortable with might be something that I'm not comfortable with, and I think that's again something you've got to navigate through with this agenda. I think I've certainly seen a change in our leadership teams in America being really more vulnerable and open about the fact that the events that have been happening over there are not good enough, and it's time to change. So there'll always be people pushing an agenda for whatever reason that might be. And I think, just going back to my previous comment, I think as long as your intention is there and the majority are doing it for the right reasons, there'll always be a blocker, there'll always be somebody pushing their own agenda for something different. And, I think letting them know that, because I think people sometimes, I like to think they're not doing that consciously. I'm forever the optimist. So, calling them out on that and understanding the reasons for that, because usually there is a reason, that as well as I do. If you're pushing something, there's usually a backstory. And I also think in I&D that I try and say, let's talk it out and let's not scapegoat anyone around this. So we've had some employee relations cases where genuinely the wrong thing has been said, or the intent I don't think has been there. So we've talked it out, we've made it a bit of a teachable moment, and then we've moved on from it. Now, if it happens again the week after, that's different for me, because you've kind of taken the time. But I think taking the scariness away from the agenda around, I know it's hard. I find it hard too. Imagine being head of inclusion and then saying the wrong thing. I mean, it happens. I'm human. I don't know all the answers, and it's a lot of pressure to carry on your shoulders. It really is. So I totally get it out in the real world with real line management. But like I said, having the right intent and doing your best is all you can do.
Yeah. And I think the reason I bring up the weaponizing thing is that any organization can have an individual that has an agenda through their education or their personal circumstances, and they can push for something. But I think why did I offer that out? I think because probably saying, but we can't not do something that is inherently the right thing to do because of the fear of an individual or a couple of individuals or even a group of individuals, depending on, of course, the size of an organization, that might try and usurp it and turn it into something. But actually that's okay, because we then need to face into that, because to not do it because of, poor people can start to have an agenda, and yes, and if they do, we'll be ready for that.
Yeah, I think if every voice is valid. I suppose when I set up the employee communities or networks, I suppose I understood at first, a number of people that join networks generally have a story or are motivated to make a change for a reason, and I love that. And I absolutely love them because they push me as well. But although I was quite happy to have a kind of let's get it all on the table few sessions, after that I'm like, well, okay, we know what's happened. What are we going to do about it? So turning that kind of into traction around making things better for all, kind of positive. I know there are some bad stories out there, that everybody's got them. So there's something there about just taking the time to listen, even if you don't want to hear it, but then saying, thank you for sharing that. Now what are we going to do about it so it doesn't happen again? And that's really powerful. And I think that, I said at the beginning, we did the survey that was anonymous. When we try and launch things like the maternity policy or the welfare audit or whatever we're doing, I try to say, you said you wanted this, and we've listened to that, and we've done this. And don't get me wrong, there are a number of things I'm still trying to push through and still trying to get through, and it's just going to take time. And that can be frustrating, especially I think when people don't work, when they only see what they see. But I know that we are trying to push those things through. So that works quite nicely, because if you have a place where people kind of get everything on the table and then nothing happens, and they think, why did I bother? And that's the worst place to be. So
when you look, I guess forward into the next 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, whatever it may be, is it as simple as just, when I say more of the same, that's not
you froze just at the right moment there. Simple as, and then you went.
Hey, boom. That's actually, I'm just really still just to trick you. But is it, and it's not as simple as, but is it actually, Guy, it's just continuing to beat that drum? Or is there a future state where you're going, my big, hairy, audacious goal is, where are you sort of focusing and putting your energy?
So we have ambitions. I think I said that before, and I've actually put them here. So I'll read a couple of them because I don't know them off the top of my head. I do know what they are, but the actual words are better on this. So the first ambition is to be reflective of the communities in which we work, with an increased focus on attracting and retaining more women and more BAME communities.
Can I get you to just
at all levels?
Can you bring that into the
what sorry, you're reading?
Yeah, every time you turn your head, I lose you. So just do that again for me.
With the speaker. So I'll say again. To be reflective of the communities in which we work, with an increased focus on attracting and retaining more women and BAME communities at all levels. So remember at the beginning, I said this agenda is just so huge. It's so huge that there's so much to do that actually you can be completely overwhelmed. And the tracking of stuff, I found that gender and race or ethnicity actually are quite easily understood by the workforce. And actually, not that it's easy, because none of it is easy, but it kind of helped me focus our attention. So I track all that, so where we are now and our ambitions for the future. I haven't put a number on it. So I just want it, and I'm seeing, I've only been on this journey for a couple of years, so I'm seeing like a 1%, and it sounds like, well, what's 1%? But 1% is massive, it's big, 1% is progression, so I'm good with that. Yeah. So that's not to say we're not looking at disability or LGBTQ plus or anything, because we're looking at all of that broadly, because that comes under the third ambition, which I'll talk about. So that's one of the first ones that we did. And just to say there, the communities in which we work. So this is an important one. So we have 400 sites in the UK, and what I expect to see in the city of London would probably be very different to what I'd expect to see in South Wales. So I can break down my stats, so I know what's happening where, and that really helps, because, like you say, if you're recruiting from the local demographic, which is right, and should be leaving a legacy in the local demographic.
Yeah, you can't force an agenda. Right. Yeah, it's different to the geography, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So then it's around to see an increase in the diversity of employees progressing within Tarmac and for us HR folks, that means looking at succession pipeline. So right at the very top of our organisation, it's not particularly diverse at the moment in its kind of diversity sense, what you can see. But when I look down the organisation, I can see that that's changing. The grassroots is definitely changing. And the third one, which is pretty huge, which is all the stuff we talked about here, is to review and remove all barriers, ensuring accessibility for every stage of career. So recruitment, development, progression, ensuring everyone, regardless of diversity, can reach their potential with us. So that's reviewing everything, and that's massive. And there's a big work plan behind all of that, from how we recruit, who goes on development courses, who we associate ourselves with, how we shortlist. There's a huge plan that goes behind that, and all of those things were just constant drumbeat, I guess is the way to say it. But also, I think don't be fixed on it. It's fluid. This agenda moves every day. Who knows what's going to hit Twitter this afternoon? Who knows what some big corporation are going to do? And it's got a movement. I love that. I love the not knowing. It's great.
And I think it's come at a beautiful time. I mean, with the whole nature of where we are, and social media was one thing, and then with COVID, it's created this whole. We were just joking about it beforehand that when COVID started, we were kind of all in our suits for the first week, on Zoom, and you wouldn't let your cat or your dog into the room. And now I was doing a pitch to the client the other day, and literally, his cat jumps on the table. He doesn't mind. I've got my kids in the background. We don't care, because things are shifting. So it feels like these topics 10 years ago, my God, 5 years ago, no less legitimate, but harder to do something about, probably. And it feels like there is a moment in time now where we can go on this.
Yeah, I think so there's a couple of things there. I think the working from home thing has the mindset around that has moved forward dramatically from a lot of non-believers. So we talk about outputs a lot. You know, if someone can get a job done, whether that be the middle of the night because that works for their school run or their sleeping habits or whatever, or, you know, during 4 hours they do as much as they're expected to do in 8 hours because they work like really hard. I think that's really changed COVID. So that's great. So what is the new normal is really interesting. The other barrier though, Guy, and it is a big barrier and it's something that we've been working on, is social mobility and access. So we talk a lot about kind of hotspots and cold spots within the UK, and we're working really hard with a number of charities that work with underprivileged areas where people don't have a laptop and can't interview via Zoom because they simply haven't got access to that. So I think as employers with social consciences, you know, although we're all like fast forward into like interviewing on Zoom, but just always encourage everybody to slow down and kind of go, great for me, I don't have to take that commute every day and rush to drop the kids off at 7 a.m. But for others, actually, this isn't great. So we just need to always be thinking a bit broadly. And I encourage anybody that's listening to this to think about that before they 100% change something to something that's going to have barriers for other people, because there will be them.
Well, listen, I'm just been looking at my notes and we've covered a huge amount there. Yeah. You know, we have. And so I'm going to, just because, you know, with a bottle of wine and a curry, I could go on about this, you know, for some time.
Anytime. We discovered we live real close.
I know. We could jog over to each other, as it turns out, which is hilarious. So I'm sure we'll keep the conversation going. But so I'm just going to bring us to a close, I think, for this, because I think I'm alert to people's listening kind of times and just also it seems like a good place. But just on a personal note, I think I find it's lovely to speak to somebody that has the passion. It's lovely to speak to somebody that has the drive for a topic, and it's not just an intellectual exercise. You know, I can see it coming out of you, and that's a beautiful thing. So just for me and the listeners of this podcast, and for those that maybe from, you know, Tarmac sort of dialing in, I think you've done it proud as a topic and as a motivation, and I think it serves, you know, really well. So I'm just going to say thank you so much.
That's really nice of you to say, and thank you. I think I'm in a unique position where I've got a job that plays to everything that I believe in, which is unusual. So thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, if any of your listeners want to find me, I'm on LinkedIn as Louise Houston, and always open to having conversations.
And I'll put that link in the description. So I'll press the stop button and we'll hang around for a couple of seconds.
Let's do that.
Bear with me.
Okay.
That's it. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please share so others get to hear about us, and subscribe so you keep up to date on new episodes. Also visit livingbrave.com if you want to connect with me and find out more about executive coaching, team effectiveness and changing culture. Oh, and of course you can buy my book Living Brave Leadership on Amazon. So on that note, see you soon.